Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of Hebrews. We're still in Hebrews chapter 3, and we're still looking at verses 6 through 11. Now, we looked at this passage yesterday, and we saw a warning to the people of God, a reminder that the Israelites, after they had been delivered out of Egypt, while they were in the wilderness, they wavered in their belief, and there was a time when they tested God. Let's read verses 7 and 8 again to remind us. So as the Holy Spirit says, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts, as you did in the rebellion during the time of testing in the wilderness. Now, these verses and the few that follow them, really all of verses 7 through 11, are a quote from the book of the Psalms, Psalm 95, which is talking about this rebellion in the wilderness that came shortly after the Exodus. So let's turn to Psalm 95. And we'll start reading at verse 7, where it says, Today, if only you would hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as you did at Meribah, and as you did that day at Massah in the wilderness, where your ancestors tested me. They tried me, though they had seen what I did. For 40 years I was angry with that generation. I said, they are people whose hearts go astray. Now those two words used, Meribah and Massah, mean quarreling and testing. So in the wilderness, the Israelites quarreled and they tested God. He termed that a rebellion. Now this takes us back to the book of Exodus, Exodus chapter 17. Now it wasn't long after the Israelites left Egypt, left slavery behind, they had seen the mighty power of God to deliver them. They had seen the Red Sea opened. They went through on dry ground. The Egyptians drowned when they tried to pursue them. They had seen all of that. But very quickly they began to quarrel with God and to test him, as it were, the Meribah and the Massah, quarreling and testing. Now the first test came in chapter 16 of Exodus, when they got hungry. And they said, when we were back in Egypt, we had plenty to eat. Yes, we were slaves, but we had food. What are you going to do out here in the desert? We're going to starve. And God provided the manna. Every morning there was manna, the bread of heaven on the ground for them to collect. It lasted for the next 40 years, you remember. God provided the bread for them in the desert. But then we get to chapter 17, and they complain again. This is where the Massah and the Meribah come in. Now in Exodus 17, about beginning in the first couple of verses, it says the Israelites camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink, and they quarreled with Moses. Give us water to drink. Moses replied, why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test? And Moses cried out to the Lord, what am I going to do with these people? They're ready to stone me. And the Lord answered Moses, go out in front of the people. Take with you some of the elders of Israel. Take in your hands the staff with which you struck the Nile. Go. I will stand there before you by the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out for the people to drink. So Moses did this in the sight of the elders of Israel. And he called the place Massah and Meribah, because the Israelites quarreled and because they tested the Lord. And they said, is the Lord among us or not? You see those two words there, Massah and Meribah, quoted in Psalm 95, quoted again in Hebrews chapter 3. The Israelites were in the desert. They had no water to drink. They quarreled with God. They tested God. Will you provide water for us or not? And the Lord did. Moses struck the rock and water flowed out. Not only had God provided the manna, the bread, but now he provided the living water for them to drink. But Moses said, why are you quarreling with the Lord? You're putting the Lord to the test. You see, the wavering of their faith was when they tested the Lord and would not believe that he could provide for them. They put the Lord to the test. They ended up spending 40 years in the wilderness because of that. So the author of Hebrews reminds his readers, you remember what happened to the Israelites. Even after they experienced the great salvation, they failed to trust God. They put God to the test. Don't you do that. Don't put the Lord to the test. Trust him. Lean upon him. Have faith in him. The Lord who has saved you. The Lord who has delivered you. The Lord who has made you free from sin, he will provide all you need to walk with him. Don't put him to the test. Don't quarrel with God. Why would you do such a thing? Trust the Lord. You're called to walk by faith. As you were saved by faith, so you are called to walk by faith. So here in Hebrews 3, the readers are reminded, and we are too as we read it, God has saved us all by his grace. We're saved through our faith. So let's continue to believe. Don't begin to doubt God. Don't waver in your unbelief. No. Stand firm. Keep trusting in the Lord. Don't put him to the test. Trust, believe, and walk after him by faith. Join us tomorrow. There's still more in chapter 3 to look at, so we'll be looking at some more of this in our next 5-minute Bible study in the book of the Hebrews.